Matchmaking on Masquerade by Mama Potterhead2492. Read by LMX Mabella. Summary. Blaise Zabini and his fiancée Ginny have a plan. A plan to set their best friends up on a blind date. What harm could there be in that, right? What could go wrong by setting up two enemies? Blaise Zabini was costume shopping with his best friend for his and his fiancée's Halloween bash. His shopping partner was less than enthused. Blaise turned towards the other man as he adjusted the sequined red suit jacket his fiancée had picked for him.
"So, Draco, are you gracing us with your presence at our illustrious affair?"
Blaise asked, frowning at his soon-to-be wife's choice of couple's costume. He would have preferred Dracula and Lady Vampira, but she had thought that too cliché. The answer to his question was a disgusted scoff.
"Do I have to?"
his best friend asked, trying on a black and white pinstriped suit. The blond man snarled at his reflection. He looked over at the infernal feathered fedora he was meant to wear as well.
"Well, she will be there."
He adjusted his collar and smiled a devilishly smile in the mirror.
She?
She who? Draco asked. Blaise chuckled.
"Oh, Salazar's shorts. Not this rubbish again. No, sod your pushy, stubborn griffin of fiancée. She is mental."
Draco knew where this was going.
"Watch yourself, Malfoy. That is my sun and moon you're talking about. She just wants to see you happy, that's all,"
he retorted, suddenly confident in his costume.
"How many pounds on this one? The last blind date she set me up was a deplorable. And really? A muggle mobster costume? What's the girl dressing up as? A machine gun?"
Draco scoffed again, picking up the hat and tossing it aside. Blaise laughed and shook his head.
"No, she's going as a 1920s flapper. Think of Queenie Kowalski. She was a beautiful gem in her day,"
Blaise answered.
"Fair enough. But masquerade masks too. Merlin, she's having too much fun with that,"
Draco answered. Blaise smirked.
"They're magic to change your voice, except for Ginny's and mine, of course."
Blaise placed his half-mask on and nodded approval at his attire.
"I hope you two know what you're getting yourselves into,"
Draco replied dryly.
"Trust me, Mr. Malfoy. We have crossed our T's and dotted our I's."
Blaise came through the curtain of his best friend's fitting room and smiled at their doubtly dapper reflection.
"You're barking,"
came a haughty reply.
"Perhaps, but perhaps not. You're just going to have to trust me,"
he repeated. His friend gave him a dirty look. The Italian chuckled in response and went to pay for their costumes. Meanwhile, in a shop in Magellan, Ginny was persuading her own best friend into the idea of a blind date. "All right, if you insist on enlisting me as the date of some poor sod who's so pathetic he can't get a date, at least tell me what he's like." Hermione winked as she tried on the flapper dress. It was a deep violet and covered in sequins. Ginny had mentioned famed flapper Queenie Kowalski. Now that Hermione was looking, she did look like that woman during her prime, except with brown curls instead of blonde. She saw the purple stilettos Ginny wanted her to wear and nearly choked. "Well, he's rich, intelligent, handsome, a little stuffy in situations he's uncomfortable with, but he is otherwise completely your type," Ginny answered nonchalantly as she adjusted her chest in her silver sequined corset and pulled down her silver hot pants. "Okay, now tell me what's wrong with him, because he sounds too perfect to be single," Hermione quipped, to which Ginny laughed. "Nothing's wrong with him," Ginny giggled as she watched Hermione attempt to walk in the sky-high heels. "Honest?" "Would you vouch for that if I threatened to drop Veritaserum in your cocktail?" Hermione winked, knowing she would never blatantly use such a strong potion. "Okay, fine. He's a bit spoiled, and he can be hard to get along with occasionally. He's very sarcastic, very strong-willed, but oh, so very compatible with you," Ginny continued as she put on her own bedazzled shoes. "He sounds like a nightmare. Thanks for finding me a real catch, Gin," Hermione snarked as she changed out of her outfit to buy it. "He's not that bad once you get to know him," Ginny answered as they walked towards the cash register. "Fine, I'll give him a chance, but if this one fails, you'll stop setting me up." She set her costume on the counter beside Ginny's and pulled out a bank card, paying for both costumes. "I promise," Ginny replied. She secretly hoped that this was the last time she would have to set up Draco or Hermione. 2 weeks later, on All Hallows' Eve, at the first breath of dusk, the Zabini's Italian villa was nearly drowned in Halloween decorations. A group-sized jack-o'-lantern perched between the staircases to the front doors, glowing happily in the growing darkness. Twinkle lights draped every surface of the backyard from the shrubbery maze to the large ancient fountain on the outside. Inside, cauldrons bubbled with simple harmless potions, and the torches throughout the mansions glowed green instead of orange to give the place a spooky, dungeon-like feeling. Witches' heads had been enlarged and made stiff to be used as bar-high tables throughout the party area. Jack-o'-lanterns led up the way to the main staircases. Ginny had gone as far as buying tablecloths from a Muggle Halloween store. Skeletons had been magicked into service for the night. Spiderwebs decorated the walls with false spider magic to crawl around them. Witches' cackles wafted through the property. Ginny had laden the maze with all kinds of spooky creatures. Zombies, vampires, ghosts, and other spooks hid in the shadows of the tall shrubbery walls. Guests were arriving in droves, and Ginny was buzzing with excitement. Her full feather angel wings vibrated as she did. She kissed Blaise fervently, and he hummed. "If you keep that up, we won't be around to host our party," he whispered, as his lips touched her temple.
"Ginny!"
Hermione interrupted as she walked over to the hostess. Her voice was slightly altered, thanks to her violet and lilac carved face mask.
"Hermione, you look beautiful. Violet is definitely your colour."
Ginny smiled at Hermione approvingly.
"Well, I have you to thank, but I really would love to take these shoes off. I've almost killed myself twice."
The smart brunette smiled.
"You will be fine. Your date isn't here yet. He should be arriving any moment now,"
Blaise commented airily, his eyes searching the room for the blond man. He spotted him beside the punch fountain, talking up a blonde in a black cat costume that he recognized as Luna Lovegood.
"I will be right back. Excuse me, ladies."
He walked away from the pair as he watched Draco kiss Luna's hand.
"No, Draco, no."
Blaise grabbed the man by the elbow and steered him away from the other blonde.
"What in the devil are you doing?"
Blaise was taken aback by the deepness of the voice of his friend's tone. He'd almost forgotten about the charmed masks.
"Your date is over here, Draco. I must say you look rather dapper in your mobster get-up. It's very fitting."
He steered him towards Ginny and Hermione.
"Oh, here they come, Hermione. Now, there's an open bar, plus the punch and sweets. I've given you a recipe for Hortensia shots to the bartender. Enjoy yourself."
Ginny hushed as the men approached them. Hermione surveyed the man with Blaise and was instantly attracted to what she could see of his body in this costume. She felt herself become hot under the collar, so to speak. She reached out her hand. "Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Hermione." She smiled at him, her purple-tinted lips turning upwards. Draco was internally screaming, "Granger?" Ginny's genius matchmaking prowess brought him Granger? He decided to play along. He took her hand and shook it.
"I'm Damien. Nice to meet you as well,"
he muttered, bringing her knuckles to his lips. He watched as blush colored the uncovered part of her face. "Shall we?" she asked, gesturing towards the bar. He nodded his assent and placed a hand on the small of her back as they walked. They reached the bar, and Hermione looked at her date. He looked rather dapper, and he seemed to have some charm to him. Maybe Ginny wasn't completely balmy for setting them up. "So, what do you want to drink?" she asked, turning towards him. He flashed her a smile.
"Fire whiskey on the rocks,"
he answered simply. She nodded. "Yes, I'll take a fire whiskey on the rocks with 2 Hortensia shots, please," she told the masked bartender, who nodded.
"What do you do for work?"
he asked. "I work in the courts. I fight for the rights of creatures with near human intelligence." She took the shots from the bartender and gestured for him to grab his drink.
"Sounds intriguing. What's your biggest case, in your opinion?"
He watched as she downed the pink milky liquid and her tongue darted out to collect the candied cherries in the bottom of the shot glass. For a moment he had a perverse thought of her using that tongue for other purposes. "Elfish welfare, equal rights and living wages for house elves. Once I finish with that, I'm set to work on making wolfsbane potion more readily accessible and affordable for werewolves." Her eyes lit up as she discussed this topic, he noticed.
"You're a saint,"
he commented, his eyes not leaving her tongue, as she licked a tiny dollop of whipped cream from her top lip.
Not hardly. I fight for the underdogs of the world because by being Muggle-born, I myself am an underdog to a lot of the Wizarding world. Now enough about me for now. What do you do for a living? She was eager to get the attention of her. I work in finance. I head a distribution corporation, and kudos to you for fighting for those who don't necessarily have the means to fight for themselves. He raised his glass before downing its contents. I try. Now, Mr. Damien, no last name, you have just got to try this shot, she urged, pushing the other Amatentia shot towards him. He eyed the shot glass and then let his eyes rest on the beautiful violet-dipped brunette. Is this the shot rumoured to mimic the effects of Amatentia? He picked the small glass up and examined it. His companion nodded. Come on then, take the shot. She grabbed the new shot the bartender brought out for her. The two former enemies both drowned liquor. Draco noticed a bit of the milky drink on her upper lip. He wanted to kiss her, but also didn't want to rush this. He wouldn't give Blaise and Ginny the satisfaction of knowing he and Granger were compatible. Is your lipstick of the long-wear variety? He asked in lieu of just kissing her. The ends of her pouty lips curled into a very Slytherin-like smirk. It is indeed. Why? What did you have in mind? She surveyed him perversively and bit her lip. Maybe a kiss and then see where things go. A kiss and then we go get lost in the mysterious Zabini mansions. Possibilities are endless. He returned her perverse look. I'm sorry, Damien, I'm not that kind of girl, she retorted, walking away from him with one cat-eyed backward glance. He took off towards her as he tried to keep his eyes above her arse. Hips swung so rhythmically he worried he would get dizzy. When he caught up to her, he grasped her hips. He pulled her into him as a Muggle song wafted from all around them. It had a beat that seemed systematically synonymous with the act of love-making. He grasped her neck gently, stroking the smooth column with his delicate ditches as his lips found the shell of her ear. If you're not that kind of girl, what kind of girl are you? He whispered, darting his tongue to lick at her ear. She shivered, and goose-flesh rose over every naked inch of her body. She wet her lips and turned to stare into his intoxicating eyes. They struck her as familiar, but in the moment her brain had gone foggy. Their hips ground together rhythmically, and while Hermione was loath to admit it, she wanted this man. Even from just moments of speaking to him, she knew he was as educated as Ginny had let on. It intrigued her. Often she was more intelligent than most suitors. He reached a thumb up and ran it across her bottom lip. She darted her tongue out and curled it around his thumb, pulling it into her mouth. She sucked it gently, all the while maintaining eye contact. She knew it was driving her date mad. Draco was near the point of carrying her to one of the many guest bedrooms and ravishing her, but he needed to do this delicately. He didn't want to force her or have to coerce her. He wanted her to do this because she wanted him as badly as he wanted her. May I kiss you? He stuttered as she took his thumb from her mouth. She smirked. She reached one slender digit up and traced his jawline, biting her lip as she did. Next, she licked it, and Draco nearly came in his trousers. He didn't know when she had turned from bookish prissy swat to sexy, seductive temperess, but he found he much liked the change. Although he was sure her inner swattish bookworm was buried inside her somewhere. Why don't I kiss you? She shot back. If you do, we're going somewhere private. I won't be able to stop myself. His voice lowering. Well, then perhaps we should chat a bit more, she challenged. He smirked down at her. We could talk with our bodies, save the chit-chat for our post-check snuggle. His a mere whisper in the crowded room. Hermione smiled. Wait, Draco Malfoy snuggles after sex? Interesting. Hermione stood on her tiptoes and took advantage of his shocked silence. She captured his lips in hers and locked her wrists at the back of his neck, pulling him down to her. Draco didn't respond right away. When Hermione moved her hands down to his back and dug her nails into the muscles there, he pulled away. His eyes traveled to where Blaise and Ginny watched. Blaise winked at them and then high-fived his fiancée. She oozed self-pride from every pore. Draco shook his head in shame. How did you know who I was?
He searched her face for his answer. She beamed. I didn't at first, but when you whispered in my ear, your voice-altering mask shifted, hence deactivating the magic for a few moments, and I recognized your real voice, she whispered, bringing their lips closer together. Draco wet his lips in anticipation. She smirked and turned away from him. Befuddlement crossed his face as he watched her walk away. He walked after her quickly, and as she turned a corner and disappeared into the men. When he found her again, she was about to turn another corner. He grabbed her waist and pulled her into him. His hand ghosted up the column of her throat and grabbed her chin possessively. "Quit teasing me, Granger," he whispered huskily. Hermione shivered again and felt him chuckle against the nape of her neck. "Why, Malfoy? Do you prefer to do the teasing?" she snipped. Draco tightened his grip on her chin and in one fluid motion spun her to face him. "I've taunted you and your friends our entire youth, haven't I? What does that tell you?" he whispered, his hands locking onto her waist. "Too bad for you, because I much like teasing myself." She slipped out of his grasp like smoke and started up one of the many staircases in Blaise's family mansion. Draco chased after her and ached to feel her in his arms again. He chased her up the stairs, her flapper skirt dancing as he jumped up them. As she reached the top of the stairs, Draco grabbed at her again, and they slammed backwards into the opposite wall. He ran his hands up her thighs. "Come on, Granger. Let me tease you in ways you never thought possible." His breathing was wrecked, and his tone was laced with lust. "Why should you be the only one who gets to tease?" She let her eyes fall towards his hips as she traced a finger down his chest. When their eyes met again, his were met with equal lust. "You only get to tease me if you plan on pleasing me." He came back, his hand snaking underneath the bottom of her flapper skirt. Hermione snorted. "That line is so corny, it might just work," she whispered as she brought their lips together again. He pressed her back into the wall, and he grasped at her left thigh. As if in a hinge, it wrapped around his waist, pulling them closer together. Draco felt a stirring in his loins. Hermione pulled away from his embrace, slightly smirked. "Tell me, can you get a candy corn from between my lips without using your lips or hands?" Hermione asked, her tone rampant with teasing. She pulled her wand out and used a nonverbal spell to make a candy corn appear between her opened lips. Draco smirked down at her as he descended to her level and curled his tongue around the candy corn. He used it to put the candy corn in his mouth, and she noticed the top of his tongue was slightly forked. Her eyes grew. "How in the name of Merlin did you do that?" she asked, watching as his normal pink tongue darted out to lick his lips. "It's an old party trick. Blaise taught me the spell in 3rd year," he murmured. Hermione reached up and kissed him again. "Very clever," she replied. "Thank you. I found it can be quite clever when it's necessary to seduction." He closed the space between them and kissed her again. "Shall we?" she asked, nodding towards the spare bedroom. He smiled at her. "What do you have up your sleeve, Miss Granger?" He watched as she crept away from him. "You should know, being the conniving, secretive snake that you are, that it is wise to never reveal your secrets." A smirk played across her purple lips as she disappeared around the corner into the bedroom. Draco's curiosity was piqued. Who knew Granger could be this sexy little kitten? When he himself rounded the corner, he was stunned by what he saw. Hermione was lying on the bed, her dangerously high heels removed, and she was perched seductively against the black silk sheets. He strutted over to her and watched her stare back at him. He toed off his shoes and climbed atop her on the bed. Arousal stirred in both their loins as he placed a hand on either side of her head and dipped to capture her lips in a smoldering kiss. He pulled back and nipped at her bottom lip. Hermione dug her nails into his biceps and pushed him off her so that she could straddle his lap. Draco watched her from a submissive position with a newfound respect. She had always been headstrong and demanding, but it made her feisty, and she went for what she wanted. He reached a hand up to caress her delicate neck, squeezing lightly. Hermione smirked at him and dug her nails into the flesh of his wrist. He pulled back at the first sign of pain. He looked into her eyes, sparkling with lust and power in a way he had never seen. It was intoxicating. She swiveled her hips and ground onto him, her smirk growing wider as she felt him harden beneath her. She fished for a wand and used another nonverbal spell to affix 2 sets of handcuffs to the bedpost. She then grabbed his wrists and pushed him above his head. She locked them in the cuffs and smirked. Draco looked up at his confined hands and then down at the woman staring at him with confidence in her eyes. She slipped down his body and exhaled against his covered hardness. She began to undo his belt buckle, and he was yearning for another kiss. "Now, do you want a trick or a treat?" She chuckled. Draco smiled at her. "I don't care, as long as I get to make you wail in ecstasy like the wicked witch you are," he whispered huskily. She nodded and undid the buckle and the button behind it. She shimmered the trousers down and took his underpants with them. His hard member sprang forward, and Hermione smiled. It was a solid 7 inches long, and it rose up to greet her. He thought he noticed an evil twinge to her smile, but he ignored it. She pushed back his foreskin gently and kissed the tip of him. She sat up on her haunches then and whispered, "Accio chocolate bat." Draco watched her curiously. A milk chocolate bat flew into her outstretched hand a moment later. She muttered a warming charm and watched as the chocolate bat began to melt. She stuck out her tongue and let some of the melting chocolate drop onto it. She sat forward and dropped some chocolate on Draco's own lips. He tried to lick at it, but she brought their lips together as a distraction from her unbuttoning the bottoms of his black dress shirt. She pushed it open and sat back, letting the chocolate drop a leisurely path down his lean seeker's body. She ate the unmelted chocolate and then began to lick and suck at his nearly hairless torso. With every move she made, he wanted to be buried inside her all the more. "I'm going to bury myself inside you over and over again, Granger. Just you wait," he spat out in frustration. She chuckled. "We shall see, Malfoy." She shot back as she trailed her sucks and licks below his belt. She kissed down one thigh and up the other, while he yearned to feel her pouty purple lips wrapped around his protruding prick. "Oh, for Salazar's sake, Granger, quit teasing. If you're going to suck it, just bloody suck it," he hissed in frustration. Hermione sniggered at him. "Tut-tut, Draco, no patience." She licked the tip of him, and his hips bucked upward. It made her laugh harder. Her chocolate-covered lips descended up on the tip as she sucked, and Draco thought he might come just from that. She slid her lips down his length and found her pace. He wanted to touch her so bad. She was brilliant with her mouth. He supposed that could be expected, considering her brilliant brain. Minutes later, he was yearning for release. Hermione must have sensed this, because she pulled him out of her mouth. He groaned in frustration. She chuckled and straddled his lap. "I cannot wait to shake you senseless," he muttered, struggling against his bonds. Hermione slipped off the bed and began to take off her costume. Draco's eyes followed the dress upward, and he sighed at the sight of her matching dark violet see-through bra and panties. "Salazar's candied ass, I'm going to pound your brains out," he whispered, using an nonverbal vanishing spell on the handcuffs. He jumped up and took off towards her. When he reached her, he lifted her into the air. He carried her back to the bed and laid her down. He sat up long enough to slip his shirt and jacket completely off. "Are you ready for this, Granger, you delectable little Halloween treat?" he whispered as he pulled her knickers down. He rubbed his legs against her wetness, and she groaned. He slipped only the head inside of her and bent to kiss the space between her breasts. He kissed up from her chest to her lips. He massaged her lips passionately with his own as he slid every inch of himself inside her tight cavern. She whined wantonly and thrust her hips into his. He hummed against her lips and thrust deep within her. He pulled her bra down and kissed back down her chest as he thrusted. He took one hard nipple in his mouth and then the other. One hand reached up and began stroking her neck affectionately. He tightened his grasp around her gently. Hermione's moan was a strangled one as she thrust into him again. "Maybe Blaise and Ginny had us pegged correctly, because, Merlin, I'm in love with this body," he muttered. "Oh, maybe they were correct," Hermione groaned, sitting up. Draco pushed her back down. He hovered over her and began to slam into her sopping wet channel. Hermione shuddered and lifted her hips to meet him repeatedly. Draco grasped at her breast roughly as he felt his orgasm building. Hermione's walls tightened around him at the same time, and the pair came in unison moments later. Draco collapsed on top of her and kissed her chest. "Really, Malfoy? That's all you've got? 2 minutes?" Her breathing was labored as she taunted him. "That was not 2 minutes, Granger. That was 10. And we've had years of foreplay. It just finally came to a head tonight, thanks to our 2 plucky yet annoying best friends." He didn't understand why he felt the need to justify himself. Her breathy chuckles made him angry. She sat up and kissed him gently. He cupped her face and smiled against her lips. "You should learn to shut up, Malfoy," she joked, pulling away. "You both should," came a woman's voice, the Italian accent thick. Hermione jumped off the bed and Draco tumbled after her. She reached for her dress and Draco for the piece of his suit. "Who are you?" Hermione peeked over the edge of the bed to see a white, translucent woman sitting in one of the chairs opposite the bed. Her hair was coiffed in curls, and she wore crisp blue button-down tucked into a floral wrap skirt. She was beautiful, and even as a ghost she looked every part of rich, gold-digging widow. "I am Carmen Zabini. Who are you?" she shot back. "It's me, Mrs. Zabini, Draco. Hermione and I were just—" "Oh, I know what you were doing, Draco Malfoy. And with the Muggle-born, shame on you. What would your father say?" She lectured, to which Draco rolled his eyes. "I could really give a snake's tail," he started. "Don't you start with me, Draco. In Mama Zabini's bedroom." Draco rolled his eyes again. "We'll be going for now. Sorry for interrupting." He stood and grabbed Hermione's hand. They pattered down the corridor to a bathroom where he handed Hermione her dress. They dressed and walked back towards the stairs and back to the party. When they arrived back at the foyer, Ginny saw them and smiled knowingly. Music still played, a bumping and grinding beat. Draco pulled Hermione to the floor and ground their hips together. They partied on until Ginny began shrieking close to the stroke of midnight. Hermione chuckled at her friend's excitement for Halloween. Moments later, Draco had captured her lips in his, and Ginny was more excited than she was at New Year's. "It's Halloween!" Ginny squealed. Hermione began to wonder how intoxicated her friend was. As Draco pulled away, he stared deep into Hermione's eyes. "Happy Halloween, beautiful," he whispered. Hermione felt a blush creep up her neck and cheeks. "Happy Halloween, Draco," she replied, smiling up at him. "Let me ask you something," he continued, linking their fingers as they danced. "What's that?" She felt a twinge of nervousness creep into her belly. "Be mine. Let's make this Halloween a memorable one," he murmured, kissing her again. Hermione smiled. "Well, getting caught with my knickers down by the ghost of the former owner of the house in her bedroom is pretty memorable," she jeered, enjoying the shock on his face at her sentiment. "So the shack wasn't memorable?" His tone was indignant. "All 2 seconds of it." She trailed off. Draco smiled and shook his head. "Shut up, or I'll shut you up." Their eyes met. "Is that a threat?" she asked, trailing her nails up his back. "Oh no, my darling Granger, that is a promise," he affirmed, sealing his statement with another kiss. "This will definitely be an adventure," she shot back, pulling out of the kiss. "You didn't answer," he observed. "You'll just have to wait and see." She smiled evilly as she walked away from him. He shook his head. This was indeed going to be the beginning of a wonderful adventure. The end. Thank you for listening to Matchmaking on Masquerade by Mama Potterhead2492, read by LMX Mabella. If you would like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on YouTube, Spotify, AO3, Instagram or Tumblr. Stay tuned for more spooky content.